So, welcome. Those of you who started with me on this channel 8 years ago may remember my old view on supplements. It was the typical doctor's view, straight out of medical school. Supplements, I thought, were little more than expensive urine. That is not surprising, given that I was trained at MUSC, the MedU of South Carolina, and Johns Hopkins, where I went on to run the prevention program, one of the most evidence-based programs in the world. For years, I believed if you just ate right and exercised, that was just going to be enough. And to be clear, that's still the foundation. No pill, no powder can outwork a bad diet or a sedentary lifestyle. But over time, something changed. I noticed my audience just was not drawn to vague medical terms like insulin resistance. You wanted practical solutions, solutions-oriented topics, things you could actually do today, now. So I decided to put it to the test, and I did what I always did. Instead of dismissing the supplements, I went back to the science. I looked for the evidence. I looked at vitamin D, vitamin K2, more recently, creatine. And in the court of scientific evidence, I got beat up. I was trounced. The data are clear, and the evidence is clear too. The right supplements make a real difference when used correctly. Now, that does not change my mission. From the beginning, this channel has focused on preventing what most people think of as just normal aging. But what's really something far, far worse, metabolic disease, slowly rotting our arteries, fueling heart attacks, strokes, Alzheimer's. And if that's too vague for you, how about blindness or kidney disease? And if that doesn't get you, how about erectile dysfunction? So, no, supplements aren't just expensive urine. And no, they're not shortcuts for health either. But if used wisely, they can be powerful tools to support metabolic health and longevity. Now, after 8 years of learning, testing, and tracking outcomes, today we're bringing those two worlds together, supplements and metabolic health. We talk about 4 key mechanisms, and there are 4 major mechanisms where supplements can impact metabolism. Number 1, improving mitochondrial efficiency, helping your cells burn fuel more cleanly, generate energy without excess oxidative stress. Number 2, reducing inflammation, lowering the silent fire that drives arterial damage and insulin resistance. Number 3, supporting muscle metabolism, improving glucose uptake, insulin sensitivity, and long-term strength. And number 4, balancing stress and hormones, because cortisol, sleep, recovery, all influence how well your body manages energy. Now, to help us unpack all this, I'm invited a special guest and friend, Sanjeev. If that's hard to pronounce, just call him Jeevers. Sanjeev Javia. He's a world-class biochemist. He was introduced to me by a world-class geneticist, David Vigorous, at Vanderbilt. Jeevers has spent years studying how the body uses nutrients to heal and to perform. I've had the chance to work closely with Jeevers, especially over the past year, and I can tell you, he has a rare gift for making complex science simple, practical, and actually useful. Together, we'll break down each of these 4 mechanisms with Jeevers and show you exactly how the right supplements can support your metabolism, your energy, and your long-term health. And then, after we do that, we'll answer your questions in our live Q&A. Jeevers, you want to join us?
You bet. How are you, Dr. Brewer?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Great. Honor to be here.
So get us started. We're talking about 4 key ways supplements can restore healthy metabolism. So help us break that down.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're really looking at metabolic disease and you're really trying to figure out, how do you manage, what are you managing? And what you're managing is you're managing the sugar, the carbohydrates, the starches that are coming into the system. This is the root of really what you're trying to manage. So you've got really two parts. So we've kind of talked about four, but we've got two main parts, right? The first part is how do we actually manage the sugar and the carbohydrates and those starches that are coming into the system? Can we do something with them so that we can, slow down their pace or allow the body to be able to efficiently metabolize those sugars and those carbohydrates and starches? And then the second piece of it is that once they are in the system, what can we do to actually allow those energy elements to get into the right places? Because the last place that we want them is in the bloodstream. And then the second place that we want them is in fat, right? And so if we can kind of deal with these two things, now what we've done is we have reduced the insults and the traumas that are the underpinnings of the metabolic disease, which then obviously leads to the heart disease, the diabetes, the Alzheimer's, all that sort of stuff. But really, it comes down to that simplicity, if you will. Does that help?
It helps a lot. So you started with what sounds to me like sort of a speed bump to absorption of carbs. Is that right?
Yeah, very much so. That's a great way to explain it because, we are going to eat the sugars, the carbohydrates, the starches. That's going to be consumed. Okay. Right. And the body doesn't have any issues with consuming those things. Where the body has issue is when you consume them with the amount that you consume them and the pace at which you consume them. I always kind of talk about the analogy or metaphor, about this. I'm from India, and there's these huge cane sugar stalks, right? And Indians will oftentimes, will chew on these cane sugar stalks, okay, right? And it's got a certain amount of sugar, obviously, but it takes a lot to actually chew into those fibrous cane sugar little stalks here. But the body was, maybe able to manage that, okay, right? But what it was not able to do is to take that cane sugar stalk, squeeze it into an 8-ounce glass, and then take all that sugar and consume it within 5 minutes. Right? The body wasn't ready to do that. The body wasn't equipped to be able to handle all of that. So, as you mentioned, can you actually create a little bit of a speed bump so that that sugar, those carbohydrates, those starches have the ability to kind of, it would slow down that breakdown and to slow down the absorption, which then gives the body the time to be able to efficiently metabolize it. If you do that, now you're working with the body rather than against the body. And so therefore, like you mentioned, Dr. Brewer, is that there are nutrients that help to slow down that breakdown and help to slow down that passage so that the body has the ability to manage those sugars.
Very, very helpful. So there are actually supplements that can help in that space.
Exactly. So there's certain nutrients that are very effective in that, right? And one of the nutrients that we really focused on the first part of that, which is to kind of, offer that biggest speed bump to slow down that breakdown, is an ingredient called reducose. And reducose is a clinically studied ingredient that uses a white mulberry leaf. So a water extraction of white mulberry leaf that helps to reduce not only the glucose breakdown, so carbohydrates into glucose, by almost 40%. But then because of that, it also helps to reduce the insulin response, okay, right? Because obviously you have less sugar in the bloodstream, so therefore there is less need for that insulin, which is a great thing, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then you've got ingredients like berberine and fenugreek, which also helps to slow down that absorption. So the first thing that you're doing is you're saying, as you're consuming food, we know the body, a lot of times, a lot of individuals say, you got to be careful of these glucose spikes. Be careful of this glucose spikes. Everyone's wearing CGMs and they're thinking about the foods that they're eating and they're spiking and all that sort of stuff. That's not the issue. The body needs the spike. It has the ability to have the spike. The problem is that you don't want that spike to be so high, because you know that when that spike is so high, what comes up must come down. And when it comes that crashing down, then you've got some big issues. So if you can level that spike a little bit more, but the main thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that that spike doesn't continue, that it doesn't stay for the 60 minutes, the 90 minutes, the 120 minutes, because the longer that spike happens, the more insulin needs to be produced and the more kind of metabolic principles that are going to cause an issue. So therefore, if you can, number one, kind of, level out the spike, that's where we use the Reducose and the white mulberry leaf and such like that. And then if you're able to kind of lower that spike consistently throughout the time, this is where now you're slowing down the breakdown of those carbohydrates and those sugars. You're essentially allowing the pace to be a lot slower with ingredients like berberine and fenugreek. That's the first bit of it.
So that's the first mechanism, creating that speed bump so your body, a younger body can react quicker. An older body, not so much. We got to slow it down. We can get there, but it just takes us a little bit longer. Now, you mentioned that you ready to talk about the second mechanism, Jeevers?
Yeah.
So you mentioned the second mechanism. It has to do with, okay, you've absorbed those carbs, you've got them into your bloodstream. That's not where you want them. You want them inside the muscle. You don't want them also going to fat either. So can we talk about that just a little bit and what supplements can do to help you accomplish there?
Yeah, you bet. So now all of a sudden, here we did, what we did essentially is we said, okay, listen, you know what? You brought in some foods, you brought in some sugars and carbohydrates and starches and such. We tried to reduce the amount of those sugars and carbohydrates that are broken down into glucose. So now I have less of it, okay, right? Now that I have less of it, I'm going to do the next thing, which is actually I'm going to slow down the pace of that amount. Even though it's less, I'm going to further slow down the pace of those sugars and carbohydrates, letting the body have the ability, the time to metabolize it. And then the third part, as you're mentioning, is that now I need to create the efficiency so that all of these sugars and carbohydrates that are left over now are able to get into the cells, into the muscle, into the organs and things like that. And so now we're trying to create better insulin efficiency, and we're trying to create better insulin effectiveness. And so this is where ingredients like the cinnamon, the chromium, the vanadium, the L-carnitine, all of these nutrients have been shown. And something that's interesting that you talked about earlier when you were talking about the fact that, early on, supplements could be expensive urine for individuals, right? And that is true. That is true, especially when they are not building their supplementation or their nutrient program on a foundation of a healthy lifestyle. But then another piece of that is you have to remember that these nutrients, they're made up of molecules. And these molecules are the same molecules that many of these drugs are actually being mimicked, okay, right? Essentially, as we know, for those of you that are familiar with drug development, is you're basically taking these molecules that most of the time have been found in natural, they're a phytonutrient at one time, a plant-based nutrient at one time, and they're simply just trying to make it more amplified. And so all of these nutrients that we're talking about in this particular instance, the insulin efficiency and effectiveness and such, are molecules that affect all of those channels that are allowing these sugars to be able to be transported through. So they're opening up the channels, opening up the receptors, making them more sensitive, so that now all of a sudden these sugars and these carbohydrates and these starches have the ability to effectively move into these areas. And as you mentioned, get them out of the bloodstream is the one thing, which is a huge thing, but then also keep them away from fat storage, because that's a whole nother issue of insulin or inflammation and cortisol and such.
Very interesting and very helpful. So anything else about this second mechanism, this making our insulin receptors, making our insulin more effective, partitioning that that glucose where it needs to be better?
Yeah, I think it's really based a lot on enzymes. Okay, right? And so you talk about the AMPK enzyme. This is such a critical enzyme because it's allowing the direction of these sugars and the carbohydrates to get into the right places, to be able to be broken down cellularly, right? Because obviously that AMPK is directed by ATP and the mitochondria and the cell energy function. When there is less cell energy and mitochondrial function, you have an uptick of that AMPK. And so now all of a sudden it's saying, listen, cells, we need these sugars. We're going to be ready to absorb them. So please open up my channels, make me more efficient, as we talked about, to be able to get these nutrients into.
It's a good point. You know, for the geeks out there, AMPK, geek word coming up, geek warning, adenosine monophosphate kinase. We've never really covered that too deeply because as geeky as we get, even I thought that was too geeky, but I think we're actually going to need to do some content on that because I've even seen other channels cover that for people. Here's why. AMPK is it's one of the major metabolic switches. If you can get your AMPK working and working effectively, you're going to get the currency, ATP, the currency for energy management. You're going to get that working effectively. So that's way too deep to start diving into right now, but it's a message. It's a flag we'll send it and maybe provide a little bit more information about that in later videos. Maybe more of a geek warning type of video. But before we go deeper into that, anything else on this second level? So we got the first level where we're saying, look, give a little bit of speed bump to absorption of those carbs. And then in the second level, we're saying, okay, make sure that the mechanisms for metabolism, insulin, the GLUT4s that are involved in pulling that glucose out of the sugar and into the cell, the AMPK switches for metabolism, all of those things are working correctly. So you don't end up with what your typical older person or middle-aged person or half of us over age 18 end up with, and that is too much sugar, too much insulin floating around in our blood, irritating the lining of our vessels, slowly burning the lining of our arteries, just like that analogy of a frog slowly boiling. So we've gotten past those two mechanisms. What about the third mechanism?
Yeah, one piece that I just want to kind of touch on that you said earlier is that, we have to remember too, is that, as we get older, all of these mechanisms, all of these gears that we have, these processes, just because of the fact that it isn't because, well, we're getting older and therefore we can't do this as well, but it's because we have used up a lot of their potential. Okay, right? Is that when all of a sudden, these sort of issues with metabolic syndrome, metabolic disease, and then the other cascading effects of it, they don't happen overnight. These things just don't happen overnight. It's a continual abuse of our bodies in certain ways, and that abuse wears out our systems. When we're young, we're more resilient. So we have the ability to kind of handle some of this stuff. But as you mentioned, after the age of 18, you start just kind of, wearing yourself out. And then at a certain point, if you're really beating yourself up, 40, 45, 50 years old, all of these systems have completely gotten out of whack. And when they get out of whack and they don't have the ability to work as well, this is when you've got to, make up for it. And how you make up for it is your lifestyle has to change. But as you said earlier, is that it's really hard. It's not easy for us to change our lifestyle, for all of a sudden for us to start eating different foods and eating certain foods that may not be as appetizing as those other foods that we were consuming. Working out becomes harder. We're more sore. We're more achy. We're all of these things that we now need to do to be able to make up for all of those things that we did to ourselves when we were young and we were more resilient and we didn't need those things because our bodies had these mechanisms and they were fresh and there was a brand new engine and you had the ability to rev it up and do all that sort of stuff. You just can't do that anymore. This is where, obviously lifestyle plays, but this is where nutrients can kind of help. And that's why you mentioned, as you always say, is that it helps to amplify some of the things that you're already doing. The reason why I just kind of wanted to note this is because that is the last mechanism. And the last mechanism is saying, okay, this just didn't happen overnight. And now that you've identified it, it's gotten to a point where now that you've identified it, you've gotten it pretty past the baseline point. So there needs to be some recovery. There needs to be some repair that's happening while we're helping to try to heal you and try to manage all of this stuff that you're doing, that the mechanisms are inefficient for you to be able to do. So I'm helping you for that. I've still got to deal with all the mess that you created and all the damage that was created from that mess. And the major area, obviously, as you said, is that lining of that blood vessel, that highway that allows this amazing life potent nutrient blood to get back and forth and to keep things that are from the rest of the body and helps to filter things and all that sort of stuff. Well, we have to help to heal that area. And that's probably the last big piece, is saying, okay, listen, what nutrients allow for that blood vessel health? What are those powerful antioxidants that can help to neutralize some of the stress that happened in that blood vessel, promote nitric oxide production, therefore creating a more healing element of that endothelial health, and really kind of, clean up those nicks and cuts that have happened through the glycation and the oxidation of all these radicals that you were consuming that you weren't able to properly metabolize and to get into those cells and into that muscle. And they stayed in there and they created all of this kind of stress and therefore inflammation. So we need to kind of help to kind of heal that and repair that. So while we're reducing what's happening in your body right now, we're also creating that health and healing. And that's that last piece right there that we're really doing effectively with certain nutrients like alpha lipoic acid and other antioxidants to help to promote that blood vessel health.
So to go through them, basically the four mechanisms: first providing a speed bump, then dealing with inflammation at the end. But between those two, slowing down and making sure that we have the correct partitioning of our insulin, of our glucose, making sure that we get insulin effective, making sure we get the GLUT4s working to get that glucose out of the blood where it's causing damage and inflammation, and into the cells where the cells can actually use it. And by the way, getting it into the right cells, the muscle cells, not so much the fat cells. Then we're talking about amplifying the good parts of our metabolism, switching our metabolism on with AMPK support. Then dealing with, at the end, with, as I said, hormonal balance, and then coming in and helping clean up. Anything else that we should be discussing before we start wrapping up the discussion and start taking questions?
I think that's really the mechanisms that you really have to focus on, as you've talked about for decades, is that they're, like they say, right? Principles, there are few; methods, there are many. Okay, right? The principles of health in this aspect, the principles of healing in this aspect, when you're talking about metabolic disease, when you're talking about Syndrome X, talking about the underpinnings of diabetes and heart disease and Alzheimer's and such, it all starts with how do we deal with the sugars, carbohydrates, starches. How do we deal with this nutrient that the body has the ability to handle and manage, but how do we make sure that it doesn't turn into a problem? And the number one thing is the management of that nutrition. Let's just generally call it nutrition. The management of that nutrition. And there's only 4 elements to the management of that nutrition. Number one, when you consume it, what is the least amount that you can get the body to have to deal with it? And so how much of it can you bind up so that it doesn't do anything to the body? And that's the first part that we are focusing on. Let's bind up those that nutrition as much as we can so that we have less of it going into the bloodstream. And then the second piece of it is that now that it is in the bloodstream, can we actually jam up the traffic? Let's make it so it's a traffic jam. So it's moving really slowly. And if we can allow it to move really slowly, the body then has the ability to be like, okay, I can manage this. I've got my potency of insulin. I've got my release of insulin. I've got the health of my pancreas. I've got all of those things that are going to help to shuttle these nutrients into the right places. And so that's the third piece, that's the second piece. I'm jamming up the traffic. Third thing is now I'm saying, okay, now that I have time, I can put this into the right places. And not only can I put them into the right places, I don't have to use a lot of insulin to do that. Which is, I know we talk a lot about, hey, high blood sugar. We should also be talking about high amounts of insulin. Okay, right? We don't want high amounts of insulin. So then we've got to make sure that we can shuttle these things with the least amount of insulin that we can have, which will cause a whole plethora of health benefits, to pancreatic health and insulin health and such. And then the third thing, and then the last thing that we're doing is we're saying, hey, listen, you know what? We didn't get here yesterday. And so tell you what, why don't we create some health and healing in these areas which are going to be continuing to be dealing with this nutrition, the sugar, the carbs, the starches. And so we can make sure that those elements are as healthy as we possibly can, which will only promote better circulation, only promote better blood pressure, only promote better sealing of things. And so things don't leak out into that is the principles of what we're really doing here. And when you do them effectively and you do them in combination and you're able to amplify what you're already doing with your lifestyle, you're going to get a huge amount of health benefit. And you're going to do it in a very efficient and quick manner,
It's a good point. Now I want to take, we are going to do a Q&A, respond to the questions and comments in a minute, but there's several of them. There's a theme going on here that I want to respond to. Phyllis Tyner is saying, we'll respond to that theme, then we will wrap up and then do the live Q&A. But let me take that theme for just a second because it's a place that we were going. At Phyllis Tyner is saying, I take a lot of supplements and wonder if some are unnecessary. At Black 325 Beamer is saying, Phyllis, so do I. And there was another comment from Freedom Walker along that same line. Here's the problem. What we just covered was complicated. it's a lot to figure out on your own. And a lot of us just get frustrated with that because you hear so much from so many sources. We're doing a new series. It's called House Calls, where we actually go to patients' houses to help them start sorting out these types of issues. The second one was a fellow named Hobie. His video will be posting sometime mid-January. Hobie was very, very transparent in terms of he and his wife started opening up their pantry cabinets. There were supplements everywhere. 1, 2, 3, 4 cabinet shelves, drawers in the kitchen, just supplement after supplement after supplement. And his wife, as Athena kept saying, you could tell Hobie was getting more and more nervous. And wait a minute, that's my creatine. Wait a minute, that's my ALA. Wait a minute, and he just kept listing all these things. And he was saying, wait a minute, I don't want to, I'm getting nervous about thinking about simplifying that. But when we first came to his house, he said, that's the thing I want to do. I want to simplify my supplementation. We did end up, well, I'll say, I'm not going to spoil the beans, as Jesus would say. You can find out what happened with Hobie and all of those supplements a little bit later in January in that video. Anyhow, the bottom line is so many people end up buying random bottles. I've done this myself. The bottles don't work together. I mean, this is a symphony. This is a team approach that supplements need to have. You can get supplements canceling each other out. So I've wanted for years, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. I've wanted for years to simplify all this, to say, look, you know what? Let's build something that covers all of these myriad mechanisms, helps people do a simple button, an easy button. This is what I take for metabolic disease, and then move on, and then refocus where we need to focus, helping our body manage our glucose by doing the right exercise, managing the right components of our diet. So we went ahead and created that. And that's one of our big announcements for today. We're excited to say we have a multi that is built to do exactly the things that Jeever's been talking about today. In fact, that's how Jeevers and I got to know each other. We were introduced a few years ago. I told him at that point, I was not ready to do it yet, but in my long-term goal, I really wanted to develop a multi that just helped people put all the complications aside. This is what I need for my metabolic disease. So, Jeevers, I've let the cat out of the bag. You want to make any comments about that?
Yeah, you bet. Well, I just want to say something to Phyllis and to Mr. Beamer there and Freedom Walker is that you're exactly right. You have to remember. So I've been doing nutritional biochemistry for over 21 years. I've developed over 350 products. I'll tell you what, every one of the products that I developed, I wasn't assuming that you were necessarily taking other products. So whenever somebody develops a product, they can't think about all of the other things that you might be taking, and they can't account for any of that. And so you're exactly right. You have to be careful in taking too many supplements because each of them were developed to be by themselves to a certain degree, right? And then secondly is that what this individual that Dr. Brewer went to go see and went to his pantry and saw, I'll just say 100 bottles, okay, right? What he really saw was 100 bottles of hope. Okay, right? They were hoping that one of these bottles or one or more of these bottles were going to be the solution for their issue. And I can even say to a certain degree, I don't want to say anything mean, but is that they were looking for 100 different shortcuts. from doing all of the other things from the lifestyle standpoint that they probably should have been doing. You know what I mean, right? And if you knew that if you did do those things, that supplementation would work 10 times better than if you didn't do them, because you can't, build. I'd like to say for sure that I will never be able to build something that's better than having a healthy mindset, a healthy nutritional lifestyle, movement, and a great community. You know what I mean, right? And so what we've done is, yes, Dr. Brewer, we've taken kind of the philosophies of what you've been teaching and what you have been able to show has a significant impact in individuals' lives, in metabolic syndrome, and some of these other things, and kind of taken those philosophies and then found the right nutrients, put them in the right dosages, make sure that the true actives, and actives are the molecules that are found in these nutrients, are there, and put them into a combination so that an individual could take them very easily. They could take it with a complement to their lifestyle, and also make sure that they're not, as you mentioned, overlapping dosages, making sure that they're not getting ingredients that may not be in the dosages that would be effective for them. And then also making sure that it's done with the safety standards, because, unfortunately, the way that the dietary supplement industry is, there's not a lot of regulation, certainly not as much regulation as the pharmaceutical industry. So sometimes you don't know what you're taking, you don't know how it's made, you don't know how well it's been tested, and those things can really cause an individual to be disappointed with the investment that they've made in their product.
It's a really good point. And I would like to tell the story of what happened with this product as well, that, we would have had it out months earlier if we weren't doing the testing that you're talking about. That really doesn't happen that often in the supplements world. But let's hold that for one of the questions a little bit later. There's a couple of questions about quality in the supplement space. I just want to make one more comment. If you're looking to continue to figure out each of these kind of supplements and continue to take that, the glucose manager is not for you. The glucose manager is for somebody like me who just says, look, I want to simplify. I want to get a combination that I know is correct, and I don't want to be continuing to think through this over and over and over again. I saw how much the difference can make to have the right combinations, especially for people who are already doing everything else right. So in our clinic here, like on the channel, we use supplements like this along with lab testing to help people take ownership of their health. This is not about replacing medical care. It's about becoming more engaged with your medical care. It's really clear. We're in a time right now when the news is just permeated with insurance yet again. This time, insurance is becoming too expensive for more and more and more people. More and more people are going to be focused on doing it on your own. I don't recommend doing it on your own, but it became clear when you look at the evidence 2 decades ago, becoming more engaged in your health care is a critical piece. So you really do need to learn about this kind of thing. You need to understand your labs, your metabolism. You need to understand how these nutrients, like supplements, actually impact your own health, help you make better decisions, help you make better results. This is what this is about, empowering you to take control of your own prevention. So you've just learned how our glucose manager can support your health. Now it's time to take control of your own health, the experience that you need, the benefits that you need. Go ahead, tap the link below, scan the QR code that's on your screen if you're watching on TV, and you can get an exclusive discount. Receive our supplement ebook. One of you responded already, has said, are you going to make the transcription from this video available? You can get that. I'm not going to go into the details on how to get that, but you get something better. Just click on that link here or the QR code. We'll give you a supplement ebook. And again, this supplement ebook is more like what we're talking about with the glucose manager. For the person who says, I'm confused, I don't really know. I hear so much about different supplements. I just want to get something that'll get me where I need to be. I know I've got metabolic disease. I know that's one of my challenges. I just want to fix that problem so I can get on with my life. At PrevMed, we're on the cutting edge. We're blending medicine, technology, and supplements. And the evidence is clear. When patients are engaged in their own care, they get better outcomes. And better outcomes for you is our goal. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to click on the link below. And Jesus and Aspen, if you will take us to the Q&A, we'll get started. So there you go, Jeevers. Thank you so much for attending today. And we've got a lot of questions. You've created a lot of interest. Jesus always wants me to thank our new members. Julie Sutherland has just become a YouTube member. And Harry H. Pojanluoma. I hope I know I butchered that name. Thank you anyway, Harry, for joining us. We appreciate that support. Now, here's the first question. Beans and lentils are good for you as long as you eat them in the Mediterranean way with olive oil, feta cheese, and apple cider vinegar and olives, which should dumb down the sugar spike. That's a good point. There's another question, and Jesus, you may be able to help us find it, about plant lectins. I wonder about plant lectins too. I eat a lot of nuts and seeds. Then you get this question about lectins from JMK. Can plant lectins disrupt or damage a cell's insulin receptors and precipitate or worsen insulin resistance? I'll give you a quick response from my side, Jeevers, and if you have anything to correct and add, please do. You'll hear a lot of folks, and Steve Gundry, for example, talks a whole lot about lectins. I've read his books. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but I will say this. The focus about lectins disrupting insulin reception, yes, there's a little bit of evidence, but it's just not there. It's not strong enough. It's not big enough to say, okay, lectin, if I avoid lectins, that's going to solve my problems. I know I'm oversimplifying the research. I know there's tons of research that's been done in this space, but maybe you can help simplify my message on that, Jeevers. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I've done the research on this. This is oftentimes a big thing that comes out with when individuals start talking about, the nutrients that are found in plants and how terrible that they can be from the body, whether it's kind of, from this carnivore society or just some of these, biohacking and kind of like sensationalizing elements. This is a perfect sensationalizing element, is that, yes, no question, the premise is correct. Okay, right? Is there are certain lectins that can cause disruption in the body in a lot of different ways. The amount of consumption of those lectins to actually do that is basically an unreasonable amount that you would actually have to consume. And you could say, well, wait, hold on. But what about the compounding effect? Because that's the second conversation that they have. Yes, we understand that 2 tablespoons of sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds, which by the way, I eat every day. Okay, right? Isn't enough. But what about doing that for a year? then that would actually be the amount of lectins that would be disruptive. Oh, okay, great. The other thing that you've completely forgotten is all of the other phytonutrients and beneficial nutrients that are in that sunflower seed and that pumpkin seed that is actually promoting the health of that receptor, that is actually promoting the health of other elements around it. So if anyone tells me that I should not be consuming natural, healthy, wholesome food, I find that if you dug into that research, and I think I've done it so many different times, that it is completely sensationalized, and that the amount that you would actually have to consume would be something that is not even reasonable for a person, you know?
Thanks so much, Jeevers. I couldn't help but get this question in from Paul, 2831. The question is, everyone is wondering about, will it be a clean shave day or not? And at Paul, you can see I actually shaved for today, but Jeevers didn't.
I didn't get the memo, but I will take care of that next time, Paul.
Obviously not. Okay, so Jeevers, this is a good one. What supplements reduce inflammation from muscle injury?
Yeah,
is it different?
Yeah, I mean, muscle injuries, so there's muscle soreness and then there's muscle injury, okay, right? And so when you're talking about, soreness and achiness and things like that, really what you've got is you've got a muscle that is completely overstressed and therefore is producing this soreness because it's rebuilding itself, okay, right? And so my major thing is that to reduce inflammation, what you're actually doing is, how do I promote or accelerate recovery? And I think that for me, and what I've experienced with some of the nutrients that are really fantastic in this area, is things like protein, like creatine, like glutamine, like branched chain amino acids. These are the things that actually, anything that helps to allow that muscle to rebuild faster and better is going to then reduce the amount of inflammation, which then creates the soreness and the achiness and all that sort of stuff. That makes sense, Just a side note, some of the other things that are kind of noted about lactic acid neutralization with various forms of calcium and things like that, I've seen that research, I've looked at it, I've even tried it myself. I just don't see it working more powerfully than the, simple principles of how do I feed that muscle the adequate amount of nutrition so that it can speed that recovery and therefore automatically reduce the inflammation and therefore create the less experience of that achy soreness and that injury,
Jeevers, this question reminds me, I forgot the most important part of your intro. You've been a Division I college athlete, tennis player for years. So yeah. I'd ask you to go deeper on that, but we got a lot of questions to deal with.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, somebody's asking about a transcript. Yeah, Jesus, if you will help us, we can develop a transcript and make this available, maybe for the members channel. But I will say anybody that wants can click on the link and can click on the QR code up at the top on the right. You'll get something better. It's an ebook that Jeevers and I are working on. You'll get the current draft of it. It's meant to be a very broad, practical approach for simplifying supplements. So we started that with our patients. We're getting deeper into that. And as you can see, that is our focus. Any comments about that ebook before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, it's a really cool ebook because for those of you that kind of appreciate, and by the way, I know we always talk about supplements, okay, right? Supplement, but really what we're talking about is nutrients. So if you're an individual who appreciates the role of nutrients, I know that seems silly, but it's sometimes when people talk about supplements, they're like, oh, I don't really want to take a supplement. And I don't think really supplements do anything, or supplements are this. You're basically saying, do nutrients not do anything? Okay, right? Now, no question that you might say,
totally different perspective, isn't it?
Totally different, but it's the same. But I also get the fact that when people say, hey, listen, I may not believe in this nutrient as much as that nutrient. Okay, right? For a specific purpose. That's what this e-booklet is really all about. It's saying, okay, let's break down the key nutrients that are shown to be very beneficial for the body, that has the science behind it, that has the research behind it, that are the reasonable dosages that you could actually consume to promote those benefits. Okay, right? And then let's break it down for you so you know what type of nutrient, because there's vitamin K2, there's vitamin K1, there's all these different types of, and so which ones are the right ones for the benefit that you're looking for, then what's the right dosage for you, and then also what's the right combination, because just like optimizing, how you optimize nutrients is how best can you mimic food. And how can you best mimic plants? This is why it's so critical to make sure that when you are taking your nutrient program, your supplement, is that it is in combination with other ingredients. Because if all of a sudden you're like, hey, listen, I think I need to manage my blood sugar, and somebody told me about this amazing nutrient called berberine, I'm going to go buy berberine. And so you go buy berberine, and the issue with just going and buying berberine is, number one, that mechanism may not be your issue. It might have been the other three that's causing you your health issue or whatever. And then secondly, you don't necessarily know how much berberine you're supposed to be consuming. And so now all of a sudden, some people think more is better. And then now you're taking more of a nutrient that can cause, like Dr. Brewer was saying earlier, I mean, you take in too much vitamin D, and that's actually a problem. So.
Very good. I'm going to move ahead. We got a lot of very helpful questions, very interesting. This one is starts in my area, but I think it may dip over into yours as well. Good morning. Started taking metformin 500. Can I take the SR, sustained release or suspended release, to minimize metformin diarrhea? Thanks in advance. And the answer is yes. We've had a lot of folks get good results with that. Not always, but yes, sometimes it helps. About when people do start taking metformin, about 90% will not have any problems. 10% will have some gastric, some gas, some diarrhea, things like that. And yes, like most medication side effects, it's very dose dependent. We don't start people on high doses. And in fact, we don't usually get anybody to a full dose of 2 grams per day. For our folks that do take metformin, the usual dose for us is what we usually do, microdosing, about 4 or 5 doses of 500 milligrams per week, not 2 grams every day. So anything to add to that, Jeevers?
You know, the only thing that I can kind of add is that, I talk about this with supplementation, is that the body kind of has 3 phases whenever it is introduced to anything new, whether it's a supplement, whether it's a medication, whether it's a lifestyle. Is you've got a acclimation phase, you've got a recognition phase, and then you have a utilization phase. And what I mean by that is that anytime you bring in something new into the body needs to acclimate to it. It says, well, wait a second, I've never taken this before. I don't know what to do with this. I've never seen it or whatever. So it has this acclimation element. And depending on what you're doing, there's certain time frames of that. And then there's the second piece of it, which all of a sudden now you continue to take whatever you're doing or do whatever you're doing. And then it starts to recognize it. And it says, okay, I know what this is. I know what to do with it. I know where to place it. But then it still isn't fully optimizing or utilizing it. And that's the last phase. And that last phase is utilization. Now, all of a sudden, this new thing that you have consistently exposed it to, that it now has acclimated to and now recognizes it, now fully it has the ability to utilize and optimize it. And this is where you get the real amazing benefit. So I'm not saying that this was necessarily the issue that you're having. I just want to generally say to all of you is that whether it's nutrition, supplementation, pharmaceuticals, lifestyle, or whatever, give your body that time to kind of go through those phases, and then you can start, obviously making changes after that. So,
speaking of side effects, JMK's got another question about side effects about a very commonly used drug. One of the biggest money makers for big pharma for decades. They're not making much money off of it anymore. A typical statin costs $10 for a month. So you're not going to see big pharma paying for pushing statins anymore. But that hasn't stopped people from hating on statins. Have you seen the 2024 article, Jan King, Shea and Associates in Cell Metabolism? It indicts statins for reducing a person's naturally occurring GLP-1 hormone. Yes, I have. It's very interesting, and it's a very popular article to quote now, especially by the statin-hating community. I get sort of beat up by both sides of that community. The statin haters, you find them a lot in the low-carb community, beat me up for ever using statins at all. But then the other side of the community, your typical doctor, our major source of referrals, because your typical community doctor has so many problems with providing good medical care for the people that are searching, people that are a lot more aware of medical care and science, people that are watching our channel. So the low carbers say you should never use statins at all. The other guys use Lipitor 20, 40, 80 milligrams a day. And I don't do either of those. In fact, I don't recommend statins to lower blood LDL. I don't recommend them for that at all. I only recommend them if you have plaque. And I never recommend high dose. I never recommend medium dose. I only recommend low dose statins of two different types. And yep, GLP hormone, when you're hammering somebody's LDL down with mid to high doses of Lipitor and other rough statins, you're going to see big impacts in a lot of areas. GLP-1 impact is not a surprise. Any comments? Have you been aware of that? Have you seen any of that, Jeevers, from where you stand?
No, I actually haven't seen this. I'm going to look into it. The major thing that we always see with just GLP-1s are, what are those nutrients and what are those things that you can do to help to elevate GLP-1 or make it more effective, actually, right? Allow it to stay in the body a little bit longer. Obviously, the drugs are GLP-1 agonists, and so they're essentially taking something that gets broken down naturally in 1 or 2 minutes and keeps it in the system for 5 to 7 days. And so that can really beat up the receptors and obviously cause all the side effects that GLP-1 drugs can have. But really most of my knowledge is like, how do you actually allow for the effects of that GLP-1 that is naturally produced in the body to kind of, be a little bit more powerful and last just a little bit longer,
I got to say, congratulations to Dennis Smith. A1C down to 5.6 from 11.7.
Wow.
45 pounds lost in 6 months. And Dennis, I get this all the time. At the end, you're saying, thank you for your help. I do appreciate that very, very much. I enjoy golf and travel, but nobody thanks me for doing that. I do enjoy providing this kind of information. But at the end of the day, Dennis, you did the hard work. Congratulations to you for looking for the information, for finding it, for having the judgment to react to it, and the discipline to do what you needed to do. Congratulations. Calcium scores, 2100. We get this a lot. It's one of the most common reasons for coming to see us. Patients will they'll start finding out what they need to do. They'll clean up their lifestyle. They will ask their doctor, something like, hey, how about getting a calcium score? Quite often the doctors are just nonchalant or no, I don't recommend it, etc. The patients will go ahead and do that. And then they'll find, oh my gosh, I've got this huge calcium score. They'll come to us feeling like they're on death's door. And, these folks with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, even 4,000 plus. And it's the first meeting with these folks is usually a lot of fun because it's very reassuring. It's like, hey, did you know that, yeah, in the rest of the world, you tend to hear that the higher the calcium score, the larger the risk. But there's a subgroup in that population. It's these people that tend to be 1,000 or more. And that's the group that's already found out that they had major metabolic problems. They had tons of soft plaque. They were in a major risk category. But when they started losing all that weight, like Dennis did, losing 45 pounds, what happened was they calcified that soft plaque. And as they do that, they're taking their cardiovascular risk right off the table. So then we get deeper and folks begin to find a different story. So Vin, it may not be as bad as you might be thinking. Any comments, Jeevers?
Yeah, I think the biggest comment is what you were saying earlier, is that, whether that calcium score is 2,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 and it was elevated, it got there some way. It got there. So really what you're looking at is you're saying, hey, listen, don't worry. This score is not indicative of where your health is, but it is an indication of where it was at before. And so let's make sure that you're not doing the same things or continuing to do the same things that got you this score, right? That's one of the things that I always talk about in health is that, there are certain things that your body now doesn't have to worry about, okay, right? Because you lost the 45 pounds, fantastic. A lot of other health benefits are going to come from that. Hey, let's make sure that we stay on that path. And what can we do to help you to stay on that path so you're able to manage that weight or to lose further weight? Because this is just the beginning of your new health journey and a new chapter that you're writing, right? And so I think that's probably the number one thing I want to talk about is that, hey, let's make sure that you're keep on doing the right things,
So Jeevers, real quick review. What was that first speed bump nutrient?
Yeah, so the first speed bump that we want to do is how do we make sure that the carbohydrates, the starches, the sugars that you are consuming, let's just use this number, okay, right? I'm just like using numbers. Let's say you took in 100 grams, okay, right? So typically, now that 100 grams is going to be needed to be broken down, travels through the system. Insulin's going to need to respond to the 100 grams and blah, blah, okay, right? But what if I could make it 60 grams? What if I could actually bind up about 40 of those grams and make sure that nothing happens to them? They just pass on through the system and the insulin doesn't get raised. There's no absorption needed and now I only have to deal with 60. That's why we specifically used an ingredient called Reducose. And Reducose is a white mulberry leaf extract. It's a water extract. It has clinicals, 6 different human clinicals to show that it helps to reduce that that blood sugar by up to 40%, as well as that insulin response because of the reduction of sugar by that 40% to about 35%. And so we wanted to make sure that, by the way, anytime that you are trying to take a supplement for something that is as important as this, you'd like to make sure that the product has some nice science and clinicals behind it, because just because an ingredient might have, let's say another product may have white mulberry leaf, but is it in the right extraction form? Does it have the right actives of potency? Are they using the right amount to be able to show the benefit? You never really know that unless maybe somebody's done the clinicals to be able to demonstrate that to you. So
Jeevers, I'm looking for the comment where they were talking about quality. And you and I had this discussion a couple of weeks ago about the typical level of quality that you see with in the supplements industry. It's just not that well. It's not covered at all. It's not regulated at all. And so you want to talk with us a little bit about what you typically see and what we're doing and why we're not putting this out, making this available months ago?
Yeah, you bet. So, one kind of quick general statement that I like to make about supplementation is that, how it's different than the pharmaceutical industry is that in the pharmaceutical industry, when you develop a product, a drug, you have to do all of this testing to ensure that the product isn't just effective, but that it's safe for individuals to take. Okay, right? The supplement industry is a little bit backwards. And what that is that we have to prove to the FDA that our product is not safe. So basically, you can come out with a product, and if you get enough complaints and you get enough issues, that's when the FDA kind of steps in and says, oh, wait a second, you need to take this off the market. So we actually kind of have to be in reverse, which is not a great thing, especially if you're not doing the right things. And so one of the things, obviously, that if we were going to develop a supplement, if we were going to really focus on this nutrient initiative. And remember, Dr. Brewer didn't have to do it. PrevMed didn't have to do it. We've got a lot of amazing education, a lot of amazing protocols, all that sort of stuff. There wasn't really any need. There are great products out there. Why develop our own? Well, there's really two things. Number one, those products that are out there didn't have exactly the philosophy that is what Dr. Brewer's philosophy is, PrevMed's philosophy is in promoting health and the mechanisms that should be focused on, because every product has its own philosophy. It has its own kind of, mind. There's a Dr. Brewer, not always, for some of these products, and they've got their own little method that they feel is more important. So therefore, the first thing was we want to develop something that really is the intel chip of the entire philosophy of what Dr. Brewer is all about. And then secondly, we wanted to create something that if you were going to go out there and take something, that you knew that the product that you were going to receive had the safety, had the testing, had the manufacturing, had all of those elements that would be of the highest degree, so you felt incredibly comfortable in taking it. And so one of the ingredients, we were supposed to be ready with this product a few months ago, 5-6 months ago, but one of the ingredients that we use, which is a fenugreek extract, when we went to produce the product, it was great when we sourced it, it was great when we blended it, but then as soon as we put it in the capsules and we went through the manufacturing process, because the manufacturing process obviously has some different conditions, if you will, that when it came out, it didn't have the potency that we were looking for. And so just a side note, a lot of times products have what they're supposed to have at the beginning of the production, but then when it actually goes through production, it doesn't have the potency that was at the very beginning. And most people would just say, well, it started that way, so it's fine. They may not even test it at the very end. They're just testing it at the very beginning. But we have 3 different tests that we do on all of our products. So our ingredient testing when it comes in, the testing when it's blended, and then a testing when it's actually finished. And it failed that test. It didn't have the potency that we were looking for by 17%. And so you know what we did? We had to redo the whole thing, and we had to get new ingredients. We had to get new testing, new blending. And so that's what unfortunately delayed us for about 6-7 months or so.
So that goes right in contrast to what you tend to see with collagen, for example. You want to give the example of somebody deciding I'm going to jump on the collagen wagon?
Yeah, here's the thing, guys. I'll even give you something even more direct if you want. So one of the ingredients that we have in our product is berberine. And you probably have heard a lot of amazing things about berberine. It's probably one of the key nutrients people talk about in management of blood sugar. It's kind of the nutrient metformin, as they call it. So several years ago, but there was an updated study as well too, a company called Supco took 32 samples of berberine from the market, and they found that 31 of them didn't have the amount of berberine that was listed on the label, and 6 of them didn't even have berberine in it. Okay, right? And here's why I kind of wanted to note that. One, we have berberine in ours, and it's a fantastic ingredient, but it's an expensive ingredient. And so if you can get away with marketing the fact that you have berberine, but you may not have as much of that in there or any in there, and people wouldn't really know, that's what a lot of these, groups and individuals will do because there's not much regulation. And do remember, anytime that there is kind of a, as I call it, a green rush of an ingredient. So right now there is a green rush of collagen, okay, right? Everybody wants collagen. They want collagen in powders and gummies and things like that. Well, collagen is not an inexpensive ingredient. And so if all of a sudden I can do some nice marketing and some nice looks, throw some individuals in there, throw up a nice website, and maybe not put as much collagen into the product and put a little bit more filler in there, maybe some whey protein isolate or something like that, right? Then the consumer will not know until the very end, meaning that they're not getting all of the benefits that they thought they were getting, and they didn't even know what benefits that they were supposed to receive necessarily, right? So it can be a wild, wild west out there, maybe.
It is a wild, wild west. And we introduced basic supplements a few months ago, and I've not had a whole lot of comments because we're not incredibly expensive, but I've had a few comments where this is expensive or that's expensive. Here's the thing. We're not going to say we've got berberine unless we really have it. So
yeah, Dr. Brewer, that's one of the questions that I will get is that, or a comment about pricing. I'm just telling you guys in general, when you're looking at really the higher end companies, okay, right? The ones that are doing the testing, the ones that are highly credible and such, because I can't comment on everything underneath that, if you will, okay, right? You truly are getting what you're paying for. Because the supplement industry, do remember, is 3 times the size. And this is what you may not know. It's 3 times the size of the pharmaceutical industry. Everybody talks about the pharmaceutical industry and how big it is and how, right? The supplement industry is 3 times as large as the pharmaceutical industry, okay, right? And so there's a lot of products out there, okay, right? And there's a lot of marketing out there. There's a lot of all that sort of stuff out there. And so therefore, you're only going to get so much of a premium from the brand that you have. Okay, right? And so therefore, when you're dealing with companies that are kind of that higher level, you're going to get what you pay for. If you buy I'm just using this number, a $20 Omega compared to another brand that is of the same level, high quality, and it's a $30 or $40, you're getting a higher quality Omega. The thing that's unfortunate is you don't know, because there's so many nuances in a product. You don't know how they are doing their testing. You don't know the combinations of other ingredients that they're putting with it to highlight and to enhance that particular ingredient. You may not even know from the amount that they're putting in. So for example, I always talk about turmeric, right? 300 milligrams of turmeric but the most active component, the one that has shown the greatest amount of benefit in that turmeric, is these curcuminoids and curcumin. And so if you've got a turmeric extract that has 97% curcumin versus another one that may have 90% or 85%, it could still say 300 milligrams on the bottle, but the one that's using the higher concentration of the curcuminoid is a better product for you because you're getting more actives. See, these are the small little things that you may not know. There was an example of the question about the delayed release. Well, that's kind of like with probiotics too, is that, some people will spend the extra money and use a time release capsule. So therefore those probiotics will settle in that small intestine and feed those or feed that area, rather than a non-time release capsule that may get broken down in the gut and may not get into the small intestine. These are the small things that you wouldn't know. It's not listed on the label. It may not be necessarily on the front of the website or whatever. You may have to dig in a little bit more. And that's why you're paying an extra $5 or $10 or whatever,
So I'm going to, we've got more comments than we can respond to today. I've asked Jesus to try to keep us to less than an hour on a regular basis. I knew having you, I knew covering supplements, we were going to end up with a lot of comments. Jesus, I know you're in the background. Any specific comments that we haven't covered yet that you think we should cover before we go? I think not. Well, maybe he's gonna.
That's a no.
What's that?
That's a no.
Okay. So how about you, Sanjeev Jeevers? Anything that we haven't covered today that you want to make sure that we do?
I think we covered a lot. I think I talk a lot, so unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that has been covered, or fortunately for all of you that are listening. But I think the number one thing that I just want to express is that at the very end of the day, proper nutrient tools like supplements, okay, right, can be incredibly beneficial, but they are multiplied when you're just doing a few of the right things from your lifestyle. And that is your nutrition, that's your movement, that's your mindset, that's the things like the sleep and the sunlight and the getting rid of all the excess toxins, whether they be the foods that you're consuming or the people that you're around and such, right? And when you do those sort of things, I'm telling you, when you take these concentrated nutrients in this form, because sometimes they're just very difficult to get from the nutritional lifestyle that you have, you can get incredible benefits. And this is where I would just love people to be at, because I am not the guy who says, hey, listen, you don't have to do this, which is a healthy part of your lifestyle, and you can just take this, because that's just not what we believe in. That's not what I believe in. Dr. Burr believes in. But if you do those things, just watch your health will be amplified, as Dr. Burr says. Yeah.
Thank you again, Jeevers, for your time today, for your information, and for all the work that you've done with me in developing this a simple, more of an easy button, a way to simplify supplements for folks with metabolic health problems. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dr. Burr.